Welcome to the channel, Real Repairs for Real Customers. By the name, you probably figured out already it's not a DIY channel. This is an industry channel. If you're not affiliated with the industry, then the explanations and the analysis can seem a bit lengthy at times. I get it. Believe you me, with my attention deficit, I get it. But this channel is a classroom. It's a very unique classroom. It's never existed before in the history of our industry, something so comprehensive. But the classroom door is open to all. So, if you want to learn a thing or two, and we do every day, don't we? Come on in, pull up a chair. Okay, folks, we have a couple of new pieces in the shop. Which one would you say was the dog's favorite chair? So, you've seen this sort of thing before, but let's take the opportunity of this job to learn something more. Now, what do we have here, and how can we determine what we have here? Well, from all appearances, we can see there are various colors. We'll get to that just in a minute, but we find that the surface is very slick, very smooth, and it feels to me that it is a lacquer clear coating. So we have some colors, various colors, but we have a lacquer clear coating. We have a little ink here. So how do we know that we have a lacquer clear coating on here? Okay, so that's a question that we want to try to answer in some sort of a methodical way. Of course, here there's no color and no clear, no anything. So we see the original leather underneath. But of course, we can put the pigmented coating on there, and we can put the clear if that's what it has. Let me get the light and let's take a look at the colors. Okay, so this full spectrum light will help us to see the colors a little better. We can see sort of a light beige in here. We can see some orange. We see some that's a bit reddish. We see maybe what we could call a dark brown and some bordering on black. Now, if you or I painted this panel like this, the customer would not be happy. But if the furniture company paints it like this and says it's antique, it's, oh, that's pretty. So it might be a good idea to take a picture of the before, in case the seat cushion looks just as bad when you're done, then you have a reference. So it's pretty heavily splotched. Here we see some beige, but we see predominant yellow spot, right? Some reddish, again, some brown to black splotched in here. And similarly here. So there's a lot of variation, a lot of random in the color application. That being the case, if it's that random, then we're safe. There's pretty much anything that we want to do on our color application, we're good. We're good. But let's take a few minutes and the occasion of this job to determine, or to look at how to determine what we're dealing with here, and that will determine our approach to repair as well. I get asked quite often, how do you identify what you're working with? This is the underside of one of the cushions on the chair. But let's get an overview of the various products we might face on looking at something. Let's look at vinyl. Now, if you were to depress the vinyl, you see these valleys that you create. See how smooth they are. The only lines are the actual texture that's embossed into the vinyl. But the lines are smooth. Okay? These valleys are smooth and the hills in between are smooth, barring the texture. Okay? Let's look at a urethane product. I'm sorry, let's first look at leather before we go to urethane. This is the original leather. I've painted this leather brown. So this that you see is different. This has a clear coat on it. So look at this brown leather. Now when we depress it, in the valley we see crick lines. All right? You can see crick lines in the valleys, but the hill in between is still smooth. So we have crick lines in the valleys. So that's a good telltale sign that we're working with leather. Okay? We're going to come back to the clear in just a bit. Now for a urethane product that imitates leather, if we depress it, we also see crick lines in the valleys and kind of smooth on the hills in between the valleys. So therefore, the urethane mimics a good deal leather products. If you take urethane though and you stretch it, you see crick lines the whole way, everything. See there? And so therefore you know that that's urethane. Let's take a look at another urethane product. This I believe is the ultra leather. Let's stretch that and see the crick lines in it. Okay? They don't show up quite as much on the light fabric probably, but there you go, crick lines. And the same thing here, you see crick lines in the valleys. And that is the characteristic of the urethane that is widely cherished because it's a cheaper product than leather, but it has that sort of look of leather. Let's go back to our leather. So where we have crick lines in the valleys, we know we have leather. It's easier to see on a darker color, probably because you have light reflecting off of those crick lines. Maybe better than, well, here you can probably see that. Crick lines in the valley. Okay, now let's go to the clear coating. Now look at we depress this, we see crick lines, right? But look what happens if we depress, we see crick lines the whole way. Okay, and look at this cushion that we're talking about. You see how the crick lines are everywhere in the fabric. They are everywhere. And those crick lines are what you see in the clear. Now we had this in another piece of furniture. And if you'll recall, in that other piece of furniture, I used a nitrocellulose lacquer. And that was the purpose, to get those crick lines in the entire surface. Let's go take a look at that footrest again. Okay, so here's the footrest we looked at before. The leg rest, at least. Now let's look for crick lines. Do you see them? Are they only in the valleys? You see the point? So we have a clear. We have likely a solvent clear on here causing those crick lines. Now, how do we know whether it's a water-based clear or a solvent clear? Well, we have another test for that. Let's go do one. Okay, so now we're back to our bottom cushion again. Let's see if an alcohol wipe yields any color. So here's alcohol. Not really getting much color there. Maybe a little bit, maybe some dirt. So let's go with a little something stronger. Let's try some acetone. Because we didn't get any color, we know that there is a clear. And so we don't know if the clear is water-based or solvent-based. That being the case, let's try the acetone and see what comes off. It's pretty wet with acetone. We're not getting much color. So maybe there's a little bit of color that went into the clear, but not much. Now, if this had been a water-based clear, then likely it would have wrinkled already. Just like paint stripper on some wood furniture, you know how the paint wrinkles up. That's what we would expect to see if this was a water-based clear. We didn't see it, however. Now, if it was a lacquer clear, we would have expected the acetone to strip the lacquer clear right off. It would have made the lacquer into a liquid pretty quickly, and then we would have had color underneath there. Well, we didn't get that either. So, could this possibly be then a urethane clear? And if not a water-based urethane, could it be a solvent-based urethane clear that we're looking at? At least it's a very durable lacquer that's cured very well. So that smooth feeling is a clear. It's not a water-based clear because of all of these crick lines. So it's likely a solvent-based urethane. And so as far as we're concerned, in our efforts to duplicate this, we want some sort of a clear that will feel just as smooth and still have that shine and give us those crick lines. So that's what we want to pick. Now, I've been using a nitrocellulose clear because that's what I've had in stock. That seems to work quite well, but we'll keep that in mind as we progress through this job as far as what we're going to use for our clear top coat. Now, concerning the color coat here, where there's exposed leather, we're free to use whatever we want to as far as our coloring. But if we adjust the color or blend a color on top of this clear, then we want to be sure that we can soften this clear enough so that we actually get adhesion, right? And as we used our acetone, not getting that much softening of that finish. A little bit. We got a little grip there. So because that's giving us some resistance, that might be good to use the acetone as a prep and then maybe get on some adhesion promoter. That's if we're going to blend some color over top of this clear in any spot that we do a repair or we do blending. Now if we kept going with the acetone, let's just take this a little bit further just to finish up our discussion. Let's see how far we can go here. All right, we're starting to get through. We're starting to get through the clear a little bit. But not much. So this is a very durable clear. So anyway, that's our analysis. We'll get started with the project and see what we can learn as we go along. As we've discussed numerous times on this channel, when you have exposed leather fibers, especially dried ones like these, you can glue them together using PVA glue. This is the glue to go to for the fiber to fiber adhesion, which means that we're not going to leave it on the surface. So I have wet down a paper towel so that we can clean it totally off the surface. And what I mean by that is we don't want any buildup on the surface. There will still be some adhesive there, but it won't be layered, it won't be built up. Get all that you practically can. The reason for this is that it sticks to the fiber better than it sticks to itself. So when used in this way, you'll find it's very, very flexible and very strong. It's not often you'd have to do the entire top of the cushion, but here we are. No choice on this one. So we have to re-wet the paper towel with some water. And for the next one, we'll have to get a new paper towel because it does fill up with glue. Okay, how do we know that the glue is still here? Because look. So while the cushions are drying, I thought we'd take an opportunity to clean these seats. And as you noticed earlier, we had some ink marks. And I wanted to say a little something about ink marks, because people are forever trying to sell you ink remover. I got a funny story to tell you. So this guy was trying to sell me some ink remover. So I said, well, what kind of ink does it remove? He said, all kinds. I said, really? Can you name one? He said, ballpoint ink. Does all ballpoint, do all ballpoint pens use the same ink? He says, well, I don't know. You're the smart aleck, why don't you tell me? I said, no. I'm the one asking the questions. You came to me as though you knew, and that's why I'm asking you. But I'm skeptical of people that claim that something will remove ink. Of course, there are all kinds of inks, right? Some ink will have pigment, and some ink will have dyes. Interestingly, the inks that have dyes, the dyes will penetrate anything that it possibly can. In fact, in leather, here's our leather sample we did from our testing earlier. The finish can be rather porous, and so inks that have dyes as their colorant, they'll penetrate this surface of the leather, and they may even go all the way into the leather fibers and be absorbed into there. So if it penetrates all the way through, then what good is an ink remover going to do? Right? Because in order to get all the ink off, you would have to remove all of the finish. But then when you get down to the leather, if the ink is still in the leather, then the leather itself will act as a reservoir for that ink, and that ink could migrate even further into the surface, even if you coated the surface with a new fresh coating. It might look good for a while, but those dyes could technically migrate. So just to say that this removes all ink, it doesn't make sense, especially when you're talking about leather. So this water-based coating is the same kind of coating as this original coating. So an ink that's based on dyes would penetrate through all the way through the entire layer of the coating and into the leather if there was enough ink there. If it was just a casual brush of ink and it lies only on the surface and it was a quick drying ink, permanent inks are very quick drying often, and so that might be just only on the surface. Maybe it wasn't wet long enough to be able to penetrate through. So that would be to your advantage. You could remove that ink maybe without removing the coating of the leather itself. If we had a clear coat on the leather, maybe that would help to prevent the ink from penetrating into the leather, because perhaps the ink would stay on the surface longer and dry before it had a chance to penetrate through. And that being the case, we can look at these ink marks here. We know that this has a very strong clear coat from our test. And so we could ask ourselves, is that clear coat strong enough to keep that ink from penetrating? And if it is this going to be an easy cleanup? So, most inks, of course, you would think would be dissolved by either maybe an alcohol or maybe another hydrocarbon. You could use xylene, toluene, you could use acetone, you could use a number of solvents. Something had to act as a solvent for that ink in the beginning, right? And the solvents evaporated and left the colorant behind. So we don't know what the original solvent was, so we would have to just test. So if we're going to test the solvent, we should start with something, of course, that wouldn't be harmful to this leather. We're pretty convinced that we're not going to harm that clear coat because we've already done the testing. But typically you would want to start out with something easy. Something like alcohol first before going to something a little more stringent like the toluene or the xylene, and definitely try all of those before you ever go to acetone. So that's why I would try alcohol here first. Let's do it, see what it gives us. So you want to go careful at first. I'm not worried about the clear coat on this one, but there we go. That even looks like maybe we're taking some of the color, doesn't it? Could it be that some of the clear coat is worn down on this section of the seat because of constant usage, right? It could be weakened. So I'm glad I'm glad we decided to use the alcohol in this case. Otherwise, we might have taken too much color with us. So there's a little more ink there, where it penetrated a little bit. Let's get our paper towel a little bit wetter. We have a couple more spots. I hope you can see them. Okay. So I don't know if that's a spot of ink. I think it is, or if that's one of the colors in the leather. It's hard to tell. It's hard to tell. There's a similar dark spot here. That could just be part of the leather right there. Well, maybe so, maybe so. All right, so that was a pretty good, easy job right there, getting the ink out of there. The permanent ink sometimes is less permanent because if it dries quicker on a slick, durable surface like this, it doesn't have time to penetrate. It's not wet long enough to penetrate the fabric. So anyway, that's our little story on ink removers. To get started on the colors, I had mentioned that we like to save our furniture colors back. I've pulled these out of my leftover furniture colors and opened them up so we can see what we have to start with. So this color looks good, maybe for a base color. Now it's going to dry considerably darker, so we could use this as a starter, lighten it up probably. That would be our goal. I think that would be good for starting there. Now we could make the other colors a variation of this color. We could set some aside. We have a couple of ounces, so we could easily set aside an ounce to add some other colors too, but use this as a base. We can see we have a rather orangey looking color here that would look good mixed in with our original color there. We have one that's rather yellowish. Maybe that would make a good additional color. So we could do variations on our theme with the orange, which is more reddish than this one, and this yellow one. So that gives us a starting point now for 3 of the colors. Now for the darker colors, I also have some here, and we can see how this is rather quite violet. That may not be too bad because it's likely to dry down looking more black. Okay. Here's another color that's reddish, dark but reddish. Maybe that looks good, you know, up in here. This color is also a leftover color, very similar to our base color, but with a little bit darker and a little bit of yellow. So we got plenty here to work with to mix and match so we can get a variety of colors. So what we'll do a mock-up of the colors that we've chosen and adjusted, and we'll compare that. Well, we've got some colors ready to go. I did them on a little mock-up, that piece of vinyl that we had earlier. And if you look, you can see the very light color might appear to be too light here. When it has clear on it, it looks pretty good. So we might just give it a shot. If it still looks a bit light, we can mix it with the other color that's on the bottom there, which is a kind of a yellowish brown. We've got a little bit of red to put in these red spots. If we don't want the red to show up so strongly, that's okay, because we can come across with one of the darker browns and disguise it. If you've ever done a faux finish in a house or a cabinetry or something like that, then you understand that you can have rather strong colors underneath, and they get washed out as you put subsequent top coats of color on there. So don't worry if that red looks too red, because it will get diminished with the subsequent applications. So at least we have it to use in there. We can mix and match still, right? We can go 50-50 on any one of these colors as we see fit. And the other question is, what are we going to apply the color with? So you have lots of choices. Okay, there's no right answer. If you really take a close look here, there's not really much in the way of lines in the color. Now, if there were lines in the color, you could use a plastic wrap, and this is very common with faux finishes. You can just crinkle up a plastic wrap like this and dip it, and then you can get a crinkle, some lines and so forth. I don't think we're going to probably use that here today. The next step up, you can get some cheesecloth, and for the cheesecloth I put the cut ends towards the inside so we don't have stray fibers. And here it's kind of more, it'll be, once you get the color on it, it'll be kind of haphazard and so forth, so it's more spotty or splotchy. So that's something you could try. The other thing is, if you have some foam, you can cut it and get you some little sponges out of it and sponge your color in this way. And I'm looking at here some solid colors. These look rather solid put in here, and so there's not so many voids. And I think maybe a sponge approach might come in handy, at least in the final applications. But here, we don't really know until we get going. And don't forget, we have the Preval sprayer also to spray splotches in, and you've seen that before. So we have all of these things to use at our discretion, right? If something's not working, go to something else. If you can't find something to use, look around and grab whatever you find. If it's a pair of work gloves, you know, whatever is around you, just be creative. There's no rules about something like this. Just try to get the general overall appearance and you're good. Basically, have fun with it. Now before applying our color, when we put our adhesive on here, there are some nibs, right? Some trash, and you can feel them. It makes it just a little bit rough, you could say. And this is still, well, not too tacky, but what we can do is we can melt this adhesive surface down with some of our alcohol. And so if we just go like this, that smooths everything out. Okay? Keep it plenty wet, because we're grabbing here. Keep it plenty wet, and just go over it, smooth it out. There we go. Now, this should make it nice and tacky. And when it's tacky like that, you know that you're ready for color. Now for the initial application, it's necessary that we go over everywhere where there were lines. Because even though this was a light color underneath, there's lines. And we want to disguise those lines. All right? This is after the dark brown color, the darkest of the dark browns. Okay, so in fitting this bottom cushion to this chair, it's not looking too bad. I'm seeing a little bit more yellow, or the yellowish brown in the original, and my bottom cushion has maybe a bit more of the red. There is some of the yellowish brown there, and some on the original right there. This actually, the original looks worn a bit thin, to be honest with you. So instead of adjusting the cushion that we just did, we could adjust the cushion next to it with just a little bit of a top coat of colors, because that looks yellowish and thin there, that first bottom, or the first backrest cushion. So we'll try to make it fit. Okay, so I'm happy with the colors. That matches that chair pretty well, and all we have left on this chair is the clear coat. And we're going to move over to the other chair and do the same thing, make the cushion match the chair, and be ready for the clear coat on that one too. So in our sample, we showed what the clear coat would do, and this is a very, very strong clear coat and very flexible. So we're not going to run into any trouble using the same clear coat as we used on our sample. Let's take one last look at our colors. We can look at the armrest. You can see a little bit more red in the top of the armrest, the same red that's here. So we've got the yellow and the red and the brown and the darker brown top coat. I went a little sparse with the dark brown on the armrest. We've got all those colors in there. Well, if you've managed to stay all the way to the end of this video, we're going to show you some crick lines. As you recall, this is the footrest that we looked at before, where we saw a multitude of crick lines in the surface, indicating a clear coat on there. This is our finished seat. Let's see if we were successful. Aha! It's not exactly the same, but we have easily the same kind of crick lines as we have here. They're not as fine, but they're there.